My name is Dana Okimoto Kiyabu. I'm from Hawaii, and I grew up on Guam. And while I was in Guam, my parents sent me to the Seventh-day Adventist school just up the road. And my teacher started taking me to church. And long story short, I became a Seventh-day Adventist.
And well, you left Guam at some point and went to Hawaii.
When I graduated from high school, I moved back to Hawaii where my parents were. I mean, my family is from Hawaii. So I went back to Hawaii and went to the University of Hawaii. I found a new church to go to that was close to the university, actually, called the Japanese SDA Church, and not far from the Diamond Head Church, geographically.
And what was your experience in that SDA church, Seventh-day Adventist Church?
It was a transition to come to Hawaii and be out of high school. I was 17 at the time, and I started going to university. I found a church and was just getting assimilated back into a life over there. And the church had a young adult group, and I became a very active member of that group.
And did you make friends in the young adult group, some of whom would become Branch Davidians?
Yeah. Jeff Little was a good friend of mine, Steve and Judy Schneider, Neil and Margarita Vega, Paul Fata, Sherry Jewell. I met Mark and J. Dean Wendell at the Diamond Head Seventh-day Adventist Church, because you don't just go to your one church. I think Scott Sonobe went to IAEA. So, we just all found each other, and we had a group. I don't want to call it a club, but we were a group, and we were called the Young Adult Group.
What kind of things did you do together?
After church on Saturday, which was the Sabbath, we would often go hiking and just be in nature. Or Saturday night, after the sun went down, we'd go out and play volleyball. We'd have ice cream socials. Went to Paul's house a lot. He had a nice condo in Hawaii Kai. We would gather in each other's homes and just, enjoy company.
And when did you meet Vernon Howell, or how did you meet Vernon Howell?
I heard about Vernon through Steve. Steve was really great friends with Mark Bro. So Mark had been writing letters to Steve and maybe even calling. And in those days, it was a long distance call. And so Steve told us about this guy that Mark had met in a grocery store in Loma Linda. And that turned out to be Perry Jones, who they were just talking, and Perry told him about this guy who was a prophet. So Mark went to go study, and his name was Vernon. And I went, there's a prophet named Vernon? Really? Like, okay, whatever. And eventually Mark came to Hawaii that summer. He was a student at the time, I think. And he came back to Hawaii and got together and said, this guy gives studies like you wouldn't believe. And we're like, okay. So Mark started giving us some studies. And it was like no other study I'd ever had. He just opened his Bible and started in Isaiah, and just started reading the story and said, well, and we just went from chapter to chapter, and he painted this picture, and he said, and this guy Vernon's got this whole message from God for his people. And, we got curious.
And where did you all gather to listen to Marco's Bible study?
We met in people's homes, Steve and Judy, Neil and Margarita, Paul, primarily. We were everywhere. But when I first met Vernon, I remember it being at Neil and Margarita's house, and they'd been studying already together, and I'd had some things come up with school and in my life. So I got to the studies a little late, and there was a little controversy by the time I got in. The church, the Diamond Head Church, there were rumblings that people, when they found out that this guy Vernon was there, the church members were saying, don't go, that's not right, he's of the devil. And I why? What's he saying? So, I don't know, but he's wrong. And I thought, that's not right either. And I'm curious, still am. And I said, and plus all my friends were there, and they were known as the study group with a capital S and a capital G. So I went, and it blew my mind.
And what was it about the message?
It was true Bible study. It wasn't, we're going to read this verse and apply it to our lives today. It was, this is the story, this is prophecy. And Seventh-day Adventists believe in the spirit of prophecy. And prophets. Prophets will come. And yes, we also talk about false prophets, but I was taught to listen, to hear, and to decide on my own, and to weigh it in the balances and see, is this true? And then come to my own conclusions. So I listened and I heard it. It made sense to me. And I thought, I want to learn more.
And did Vernon eventually come to Hawaii?
He did come to Hawaii in maybe August. I had just registered for school. And when I first saw him, I was not impressed. People talk about charisma, and let's just say he wasn't my type. I was a university student. I was, and he was a simple guy. He didn't graduate from high school, and he fully admitted that. He said, I'm not an educated man, but I've had a vision and I've been shown something. And God says, this is a message for his people. Are you his people? Do you want to be part of this group? So I listened. And I felt what I believed to be the presence of God. There was a spirit in the room that called to me and said, listen. So I did.
And so once you started giving a Bible study, for instance, a message that Mark Rowe had learned from you, were you impressed with Vernon's ability to interpret the prophecies?
His ability to paint the picture that was there was amazing. He could bring the Bible to life. And I had been a student of the Bible since 5th grade. And I thought I knew scriptures. I've done my memory verses, and I'd been to church for several years by then. I mean, I wasn't that old when I met him. I was 20. But the way that he explained it, and I knew that I needed to learn more. And he said that there was a group in Palestine, Texas, in a camp, and it was rough living, but I like camping, so that didn't bother me at all. So he said, come and learn. And he's gathering together a group of people who would be part of a group that he called the Wave Sheaf and I can't explain what it was because I don't remember anymore, but basically we were going to be the 144,000 who would teach people God's message to prepare them for the kingdom, like John the Baptist did with Jesus. And when the kingdom was established on earth, which was different from Seventh-day Adventist doctrine, it was going to happen in Israel. The Mount Zion would rise up and God's kingdom would be established. And that's where the wolf would lie down with the lamb, and all people would come to learn about the kingdom of God. And it would be here on earth before the second coming of Christ. That was different. but I saw it there in the Bible. And I went, wow. And I get a chance to learn the message and go out and teach people about it and, be a real missionary. And yeah, that appealed.
I'll just add the wave sheep are the first of the first fruits. And so I think 144,000 are the first fruits. If I remember.
Yes, the wave sheaf are the first of the first fruits. 144,000 are the wave sheep. Correct. Thanks. Because I'm like,
yeah,
I remember sort of.
Yeah. So the wave sheep they call out, or they call, and they teach the hunter.
Yes, the wave sheep. The wave sheaf teaches the 144,000, something like that. But either way, it tied in very nicely to what I already believed. And it was just really, really neat to look at it and say, look, you know what he's showing me? He's showing me my part in God's words to me right now, this moment. Wow. As a Christian, wow, God's speaking to me, not through him. He's a prophet. He's speaking and sending me this message. But look, there you are. That's you.
In the Bible.
In the Bible. We would say written in the book. We are written in the book. And to look at that and go, yeah, that's me, I think. Or to think that could be me. Because at the time I was just learning, like, this is who I can be. I can be this person. I could be part of the wave sheep.
Did Vernon come back to Hawaii multiple times before you all decided to move to Palestine?
For me, he was there just during that summer and then he left. And he did come back multiple times through the years. I just wasn't there at the time.
I'm curious, what during that period with Vernon, when you first met him, you heard him give Bible studies, but you also probably observed him just hanging out and doing things with people. So was there a different persona about him when he was just being ordinary Vernon?
Yeah. He was just this goofy guy. And he called himself a redneck. And I went, what's a redneck? And basically, he's a redneck. He's just this country hick of a dude from nowhere in Texas with this wallet with a chain that motorcycle bikers wore. And he wore socks with his sandals, and that's just weird. I wouldn't say he was a cool dude until he opened a Bible, and then it was different. He became different when he was teaching, and suddenly it was like he stepped into this thing that he knew, and he spoke with confidence. And that was pretty impressive to see too.
Yes, and let's confirm the year you first saw him give the message or give a Bible study. Was that 1990 or
1986? 1986.
Okay. So by 1986, was he preaching that he was the Lamb in the book of Revelation?
No. He was a prophet with a message. And he would frequently comment that prophets are like Dixie cups. They're disposable. Look in the Bible. Look what happened to all the prophets. And he would talk about all the horrible things that happened to Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel. Like, look what happened to them. It's like, who wants to be a prophet?
And in his role as a prophet, and I'm sort of just asking in light of the historical interpretations in the Seventh-day Adventist Church and Victor Hough's Davidian group. Did you all, and also, Ben Roden and Lois Roden, who were seen as prophets as being divinely inspired to interpret the Bible's prophecies? Is that how you saw him, or did you see him as creating something new?
He actually told us about Victor Houteff and Ben and Lois Roden because I'd never heard of them. Some of the members at one of the churches had heard of the Shepherd's Rod before and Victor Houteff. And, you know, I was young. I was fairly new to the church, and my parents were not Seventh-day Adventists. So I was kind of a maverick in my family that way too.
So why don't you start over about talking about
learning about Victor Houteff.
And how you understood this lineage of prophets and whether you saw Vernon as being part of in what sense was he a prophet?
Okay. Seventh-day Adventists teach about the three angels' messages, and they talk about a lineage starting with going back to William Miller back in the temperance movement in the 1800s. And we went through William Miller and maybe somebody else. And then Ellen G. White came along with the third angel's message. So she was the third angel. And what Vernon taught at the time, he gave us a little bit of a history lesson as to his personal lineage in this line of angels' messages. And there are 7. And that came to be really important later on. But he was talking about, okay, Victor Houteff representing the Shepherd's Rod movement as the 4th angel. Benjamin Roden was the 5th angel. Lois Roden was the 6th angel. And he had the 7th angel's message. And so he kind of summarized a little bit for us Victor Houteff's Shepherd's Rod message. Ben Roden brought in the feast days, and they were still important. So this group under Ben and Lois Roden also kept Jewish feast days. Purim, which is the story of Esther, the Day of Atonement, Passover, things like that. And Sister Lois Roden brought in the feminine Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is feminine. She's the mother. So you have the Father, the Mother, and the Son making up the Trinity. Because he said, it's not like there's 3 men in heaven together making a family. You have a mother, a father, a mother, and a son. That's a family. And I went, yeah, that makes sense. And to this day, when I think of the Spirit, it's feminine. She is still feminine to me. So, you know, yeah, and and it was a lot to be learning at the time. I was still in school. I was starting my senior year in college, and I was still busy, but I was excited. I was so excited to learn this and to hear a call like this, because I was looking for something, because as an Adventist, I believe we are in the last days. And one of the things that Vernon pointed out was, look at your church. Can you tell the difference between the church and the world anymore? And, you know, I was fairly strict at the time, I thought. I went to church every Saturday. I went to Sabbath school church. I was a Pathfinder leader, which is their version of Scouts, which again, I'd done that at the Adventist school in Guam. So that's where I learned to camp and love it and all that. And things were coming together. You know, this must be it. That was my thought. This must be it. Okay. And I went to learn more.
All right. And is that when you decided that you wanted to move to Texas? And did you follow other people who were moving to Texas, or, you know, how did that come about?
During these studies in Hawaii, he mentioned this group in Palestine, Texas, and they were in the woods at a camp, and he always called it the camp. He said, people live in buses and tents. And he said, this is rough living. This is rough living. We go in buckets and bury it. Quite graphic. And I went, and I thought to myself, I can do that. And the idea of camping and studying the Bible I went, okay, I can do that. And I wanted to learn more. There was so much, the promise There was the promise of more. This was just the beginning. And yeah, I wanted to learn.
And so when did you go, and how did your parents react?
My parents, first let's start with me and my parents. I'm Japanese. I come from an immigrant family. We believe in hard work and education. Education. That is how you make your life better. You need to get a college education specifically. I realized I had to pause my education to go do this, which meant withdrawing from the university and going. This did not sit well with my family at all. I didn't tell them anything until I withdrew from the university.
And can you give the year? And
Oh, okay. I was 20, about to start my senior year of college. It was 1986. And when I withdrew and told my parents that I was going to go and study in the woods in the middle of nowhere, Texas, they went, "No, that's not what you're going to do. You are going to go back to school tomorrow and re-register. Thank you very much." And I said, no. My father came to a study at Paul's house, and Vernon was there. And he listened to the study, which was really more of a history lesson of Seventh-day Adventists and Branch Davidians and things like that, very general. And my father was not impressed, but my father's not a religious man. My family didn't go to church, anything like that. And, well, I'm sorry. My mother was a Mormon. Yeah. And Dad came to the study, listened, and said, he spoke with Vernon and said, "No, she's not going. And she's going to go back. She's going back to school tomorrow. She's re-registering." When we came home that night, I had to tell my father, who is the head of my life at that point, no. Because I believed this is what God wanted me to do. And I told my dad that I always believed there would come a time where I would be asked to do something that my family wasn't going to approve of. And this was it. That I may have to choose God over whatever and just do it. And I did. It was hard. It was really hard. I am my daddy's girl. I'm still my daddy's girl. But this was important. This was about salvation. And it wasn't just my salvation. This was about saving the world.
In what sense was it about saving the world?
Because we're, as part of the Wave Sheaf, we would be teaching the world and preparing the way for when God's kingdom was established, that then they would know that's their cue. Let's go study. Let's go join the kingdom. Because there would be a place of perfection on this planet before the second coming of Christ.
At that point, was Vernon teaching that members of the Wave Sheaf would have to die?
At that point, we were talking about a time of war and that there would be fighting and maybe some people would die. He spoke of the mighty men of God and they would be fighting. So we're preparing for war. We need to learn. Part of the reason for being at camp was we need to learn what it's like to live with the bare necessities. We need to learn to live with that because Americans are lazy, fat and lazy, basically. And even as Adventists, we lived a health message, we lived a healthy lifestyle. But, as we were in the modern world, electricity, plumbing, all that stuff. And so he said, we need to learn how to toughen up and just buckle down, learn the word, go out and teach it. But yeah, in the prophetic picture, we're learning the prophecies, we're learning what is to come. Part of what is to come is war, and we have to get ready.
And at that point, was he teaching that the war would happen in the Holy Land or in Texas?
This war would happen in Israel. Because the idea of the prophecy being fulfilled as it is written, that's a literal if it's going to happen literally as it was written, it was going to take place where it was written, which meant modern day Israel, in the land of Palestine, the real Palestine, or Palestine, but we called it Palestine. And so it was my belief at that time, we're going to go to Israel and live how they were going to live and, farm, raise our food, live independently, what we would call off the grid these days, which that term didn't exist back then. So we were living in a camp situation to learn how to live that way, with the bare necessities, learn the word so that we could go out and teach it, basically. And the Lamb, he was not yet the Lamb. He was still the prophet.
Well, since we're talking about Palestine, I've always wondered, is that why he chose he selected that spot in the woods near the city called Palestine? Was it sort of like the first step to get into the actual land of Palestine / Israel?
I have no idea how they ended up there. But there are many biblical names in this part of the States. We have biblical, or there's Athens, Georgia. There's just a lot of place names that are from other places, but there's a lot of biblical place names as well here. He could have chosen any one of them. I think he just had an opportunity. I don't know. I don't even know who owned the land or how we got there. I just know that it was there, and that was just, it was like, oh, okay, we're going to go live in Palestine so that we can go to Palestine.
Let me go backtrack a little bit and just ask about your mother's view and especially since you say your mother was a Mormon or Latter-day Saint.
Yes.
And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints was founded by a prophet Joseph Smith, and he actually revealed a new scripture in addition to the Bible, or the Christian Bible. So, what did your mother think about you finding a prophet to follow?
My mother never really talked about that. My parents were more concerned that I was quitting school than anything else. It wasn't that I was going to go study the Bible somewhere. It was more, you need to finish your education. And I felt that. As a fourth generation American, I felt that because, I wanted to finish school too, but I had to do this first. And I didn't know how to explain that to them because I knew, even though my mom went to church, and even though our churches were founded pretty much at the same time, and I used to go to church with my mom when I was growing up in Guam. So I went to Adventist church on Saturday and the Mormon church on Sunday, and I lived a holy life. But that was who I was. I was a seeker of truth. And so I listened to the Mormon missionary lessons too. And I went to Mormon seminary for New Testament, which is kind of like Bible school for Mormon kids about high school age. And as an Adventist, I had studied my Bible, and I got into some interesting discussions with my teacher in that class too. Very, very detailed philosophical discussions about the seventh-day Sabbath.
And what was your major in college?
I was a pre-med biology major. I was going to be a doctor. I was going to be many things, but by the time I hit college, I wanted to be a doctor. So I was an officer in the pre-med society. I've been working prerequisites to get into all the good stuff. But that summer, right around the time that I was hearing right around the time Mark had met Perry, and I was learning about a prophet. Outside of that, I had decided that I don't think I want to be a doctor. That's a lot of time. There's med school, there's residence. It's really expensive. And I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. I was interested in that. And I stopped for a moment and went, I want a life. My best friend's father was a doctor. He wasn't home much. And I thought, and what do I want to do? So I was at a crossroads there too. So yeah, I was kind of ready to listen to something else, I suppose. And then here came an opportunity to do something else and learn something new. But I wasn't at the time. I'm a nurse now. And at the time, my opinion of nursing was, I don't want to do that. They're overworked, underpaid, underappreciated. Not gonna be there. And that's the irony of it all, is that I am a nurse today too. But back then, I wanted to be a doctor.
But it prepared you well for nursing school.
It actually did. Later on in my story, it worked out really well.
So when you got on the plane to fly to Texas, did you go by yourself or did you have friends going with you?
Nope, I found a one-way ticket for $99 to LA. And I waited till I was 21. My mom asked me to wait till my birthday, which is at the end of November. So my ticket left on December 3rd. So I honored my promise. And it also gave me time to work a little so that I could support myself, because, for $35 a month, that would pay for your food
In the group.
in the group. And I said, you need it. We were thinking 6 months to a year, make sure you have that, pay off your bills, get your financial house in order, and then come. And I thought that was okay. That sounded responsible. It wasn't just drop everything and come. No, get your financial house in order. And those were his words. Then you come. Then you can study and not worry about things.
And so you were earning some money to pay.
Yeah, I worked. I'd been working, at student help through college, and I started doing clerical temp work, like a Kelly girl, because I could type.
And well, while we're talking, you mentioned the paying $35 a month for your food once you joined the group. And you mentioned to me earlier that the name of the organization that you wrote the check out.
Once I joined the group officially, there wasn't really a joining or anything. We didn't have baptisms or stuff like that. Although I know that he had baptized some members into this new group once they left Mount Carmel. But I wanted to pay tithe as well, because Adventists pay 10% tithe. This group would pay 20, sometimes 30% tithe to support the organization. Or in those days, it was the association. That's what it was, the association. So I wrote my checks out to, and back up one more time. Under the Rodins on Mount Carmel in Texas, they were the Branch Davidian Association, the Branch Davidian Association of Seventh-day Adventist, or something. It was the BDSDA Association.
Yes, it was the General Association
Yeah.
of Branch Davidians.
Thank you. The General Association of the Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventists. This group, or these checks that I made out, were to the DBDSDA Association. So the Davidian, Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventists, which was a mouthful. So that's not what we called ourselves. That's what the bank account said.
And so what did you call yourself?
We were just the group. We never had a name that I remember. It was just like the study group was the study group. We were a community. The closest I would get was, it's kind of like a commune. That's the word. It's like, you're like a commune. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. And I kind of thought of it, well, I'm kind of going to go to a hippie commune.
Okay, so when you got there, I mean, some people were living in school buses. Some people were living in little wooden huts, I think. So what were your living accommodations?
When we first got there, people were in tents, buses, and vans. There was a main building, a log building, where there was a pot-bellied stove and some airplane seats around the perimeter and a piano. The cabins, when we came, we brought the materials to build 3 of those cabins that people will see in pictures. So at the time I got there, I stayed in a tent. Yeah.
And you taught, so did you get a job once you were there in Texas?
No, once I was there to study. So I would just pay my $35 a month. And studied and lived life, which was different. I lived the camp life, which I really enjoyed. It was peaceful. I was in the woods. We were in the piney woods of Texas. And that's a really nice place to be. I experienced seasons for the first time because I'm an island girl growing up in the tropics. And it was a quiet time in my life. Vernon wasn't always there. So when he wasn't there, we had a daily routine. You'd get up for breakfast. We would ring a bell for breakfast. But basically, the women and the teenage girls made the meals, and we would take turns daily. So somebody would have, for instance, when I had kitchen duty, I would plan breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then I'd have a kitchen crew with me, and we prep and serve the meals. And then the girls would clean up after, which was great because I didn't have to do the dishes anymore. We didn't have running water, so we learned to conserve water. But we would get up in the morning, have breakfast, and then around 9, we would have what was called the daily, which was a Bible study for about an hour. And then we would go about our business, either studying, just taking care of whatever our day-to-day needs were, personal study or something else, because we would have leisure time as well. Have lunch, a little more free time, and then around 3-ish, another daily. And I think that was from when they were at Mount Carmel. That's what they did. And more free time, dinner, and then in the evening. So pockets of free time throughout the day. And when I first got there, we were building the cabins for one of them was mine, and which I paid for. And I think it was somewhere between $300 to $500 for an 8x12 cabin in the woods, basically plywood studs. But that was my first home that I owned.
And let me just clarify. So the daily in the morning, what time is
It was around, it changed with the time of the sunrise and the sunset. And Perry Jones would look all these things up, and he would have a schedule that he consulted and said, it's at this time. And so then someone would be in charge of ringing the bell as the call to worship.
And so if Vernon was there, I guess he would do the Bible study. Then Vernon was not there, he would do the Bible study.
If Vernon was not there, it could be Perry or Clive, typically Perry or Clive. Let me tell you, I mean, Perry was great, but Clive was better. Clive would be someone I would love to have be the pastor of my church. And when he gave a study, he would often, he'd read, he'd give his lecture, and then he'd always have some kind of comment that made us laugh. And that's Clive. And then later on, as Steve and Judy were there, if Mark were there, people who had a handle on what the lesson was and what particular study it was, because they were kind of by subjects. We would talk about the kingdom in Isaiah, or something from the minor prophets, or maybe even a little bit of Revelation. Whoever had a handle on it would try to teach it, because that's what we were there for. We were students who were learning to teach. So JD and Wendell was fantastic as well. And I gave a study or two eventually. I have no clue what they were about, but we would take turns. So yeah.
Well, I know Bonnie Haldeman, Vernon's mother, lived with the group at the Palestine camp for a while. So did you get to know Bonnie, and what was she like?
Yes, Bonnie was there when I first got there, and she lived in a bus with Novelette Sinclair, this lady from Canada. Bonnie was just the nicest person. Warm, welcoming, just like everybody's grandma. Oh, and she could cook. Oh, this woman made the best sweet potato pie. And I didn't even know what sweet potato pie was, but yeah. Just a wonderful woman. But she was ambivalent about the message. Bonnie would come and go through the years. And, this is her son. So I think it must have been a shock for her as well. But when she was there, she was just really nice. She's wonderful.
How did you know Bonnie was ambivalent about the message?
Just in conversation. And he would say things like, "Mama, y'all don't really get it sometimes, do you?" And she'd go, "Well, I'm trying. I'm a bit slow. Give me time."
Well, yeah, Bonnie, I agree. Bonnie had a lot of charm, and
Yeah.
she had an outgoing, warm nature. Do you think Vernon took after her in any way in terms of his way of relating to people?
Actually, no. No.
Let's repeat what my question was.
I could not believe that Vernon was her child, because he did not have her mannerisms, really. Not like his personality was just different. He was so driven. He was very driven, and she was very laid back and relaxed. And the difference, I never really thought about it that way, but he was not his mother's son.
Okay, so let's talk about Vernon. So how was he driven? I mean, what was he driven about?
Vernon was a man on a mission. He had a message to get across. And so even though there was a lot of leisure time, he expected you to be using that time to study. And yeah, and it was more of a, yeah, it's time to get to know each other. And we were making friends and socializing, but there were also times where it's like, y'all should be studying. What are you doing? We're not here to have fun. And we go, oh, okay. We open up because we often had our Bibles with us and we would start studying. We would get sidetracked and go off on a tangent somewhere. And he would come by and go, and just look at you and we go, oh, okay. But yeah.
So let's see, I think we're up to 1990 now.
No, we're not. We are still in 1987. I spent about a year in Palestine. I arrived in January. In the spring, people came to visit for Passover. I had met some people from Australia in San Bernardino. We stopped, when I first came, there was a home in San Bernardino that was kind of the pit stop before you went to Palestine. And I met Elizabeth Baronier there. Actually, Clive was there. I wrote a letter to home about it and said, there are 3 people from Australia here. And then I talked about my friends also being there because my mom knew, my parents knew Jeff. And so I'd often write about Jeff and what he's doing. But I didn't really know how the group worked as far as who was coming in from where until Passover came. And people started coming in from all over. And they would fly to Waco or drive. I don't know how they got there.
So they were coming into the camp.
They were coming to the camp. And I met Jean Smith, Bruce and Lisa Gent from Australia, James and Michelle Tom were there. That's the Australian group. And I think they had been Branch Davidian under Lois Road, and certainly Jean Smith, an older woman. But other people came. There was a guy who was from Canada that Steve had talked to who showed up one day, and he reminded me of Superman. I think his name was Carl. But he was someone who just came and studied with us for a little while and then went on his merry way. I don't know what happened to him, but we gathered for the Feast of the Passover, and we kept it similar to how I guess that they did it at Mount Carmel. We made unleavened bread. We served the daily was we did the communion crackers and the grape juice twice a day, and that was part of Passover as well. But for Passover, we ate only unleavened bread, no leavening in anything. We had a lot of greens.
And did you have the Seder meal?
We did not have the traditional Seder meal.
But during Passover, did he give additional?
And yes, during Passover, he's there, so studies went longer. And sometimes very long. This is before, I don't remember when the really long studies happened. It may have started there, but they would go 5-6 hours. And we were excited because he was there talking, and I love listening to it. So Passover would be a time, people would come down for a week or 2. So we had a Passover season. It wasn't just one day. And the folks from Australia didn't come from just one day. And our group started to grow slowly as well. People started having babies. And we continued studying. One of the things that was offered to me when I first came was Vernon was very well aware that I had been a college girl. And he'd met my father, and he knew how important that was to my family. And he came and asked me, so how long would it take for you to finish school? Like, I said, a couple, maybe 3 years, but I think I could do it in 2. And he said, what do you think about being a nurse? Because we need a nurse, and we're looking for someone to deliver babies. Would you be interested? And I thought, yeah. I wasn't sure about nursing, but I could help with delivering babies. Mary Bell Jones at the time had signed up for a correspondence course in midwifery. And so she said, get together with Mary Bell and talk about this. So Mary Bell and I got to talking, and she said, well, I'm taking this course. And she gave me the reading list. And one of the books was called Spiritual Midwifery by Ina May Gaskin. And I'd never heard of this group, but they're a group in Tennessee called The Farm. And their approach to childbirth was unique to me, but I thought it was really neat. They viewed contractions as rushes of energy. It's an energy rush, and husbands and wives helped each other, and they were a hippie commune. And I still have that book. But I thought, okay, I can do this and I started looking into just, nursing. And I went, nursing, okay. If you really want me to, I can do that.
So did you start attending classes at that time? Or was that...
No, school was later. This is still Palestine. It was just midwifery and just more planning, like, okay, we'll think about it. I looked into University of Texas at Tyler, because that would be the closest university. Because for me, a 4-year degree made the most sense. Becoming an RN with a bachelor's degree would then allow me to work as an RN as well, while studying to become an RN, a nurse midwife, because that's actually further schooling. Janine Buns was an RN in Los Angeles, and she made very good money. And the Buns supported the group very, very well. Dawn was an engineer. So, I could be part of the group that was also supporting through while functioning as a midwife to help deliver the babies. Because by then I was learning about, women who would be having children for God.
Okay, so let's talk about
yes.
That. So by this time had Vernon, and was he still Vernon?
He was Vernon until 1990. Yeah.
So we'll talk about the additional wives. So by this time he was additional wives, but also by this time had he become the Lamb of God yet? Or
the time that I spent in Palestine was the time that he became the Lamb of God. Sometime that summer, we were in a study. Robin Buns was there, and she and I were becoming great friends. And I was learning this Bride of Christ doctrine as well. And I'm thinking, I almost left, because when I first heard about it, I went, no, you're getting weird on me. The Bride of Christ. The idea was that the bride, which I had always come to mean the church, and the symbology in the Bible is when Christ came again to claim his people, he would marry his bride and seal the deal with his church. Vernon taught that this was going to be a woman, an actual woman, and some women would have the chance to become this bride. And wouldn't that be cool? And in theory, I thought, oh, that's okay. Then I realized that he means women, and that there were women who were going to be doing this and having babies for God, which was part of you're going to have babies for God. That was part of the message. And some of this was going to lead into the Assyrian in making war on the people, meaning the Assyrian, this is going to be really convoluted because it takes hours to figure it out. But in a nutshell, the Assyrian was America, going to get mad at us, God's people. And part of it was going to be that these girls are having babies. Women, girls. But I use that term interchangeably at this point because at that point when he was saying this, most of these girls were underage. And so I want people to be clear. Was he having sex with underage girls? Yes. In the context of they're being offered the opportunity to be the bride of Christ. Who wouldn't want to make God their one and only?
So by this time, he was saying he was a Christ.
He wasn't a Christ, but this was the message. This was his job, even as the prophet. He was the messenger, so it was still through him, the man. And then sometime in the summer, he was talking about the Lamb of God. There's the Lamb, and he holds a book in his hand, and there are the seals. And these are the 7 seals, and only the Lamb can open. I'm sorry, the book is closed. It is sealed, and only the Lamb can open the book. Therefore, he's the one opening the seals. So, oh my goodness, I must be the Lamb. Do you guys see? Do you see? And we're going, Robin especially going, yeah, but, and Robin was going, no. She did not want it to be him. And I was not yet part of the house of David. And I just looked at it and went, really? And Robin and I talked about it. And at that point I said, because I was spending time with Robin because she so was into this, to being the bride. And I said, I want to learn a little bit more about why. Just tell me why. And share with me what this is all about. So she did. And I learned a little bit more and made some connections through her. I wanted to see it through her eyes because she wanted it so much. And it's like, oh, okay. So we would study together. And at that time when he was implying, he wasn't implying, he said, he's the Lamb. I said, well, it's not like he's saying he's Jesus Christ or anything, right? And she's going, yeah. I said, okay. That would come back to bite me in the butt bad, to be honest. That was way in the future yet. That was years in the future. So for now, it's not like he's saying he's Christ. Okay. So, we kind of calmed each other down, and I studied more. And around that Passover time, I believe, is when George Roden, who is Lois Roden's son, called over. We had a phone in the camp. We didn't have electricity, no running water, but we had a phone line. We had a little wooden phone booth. And he apparently called and talked to Vernon and said, hey, I've got this woman over here. And no, he didn't say that. He just said, how about you come over here? And he must have said he's got somebody there. He said, I have this lady here, and whoever can raise her from the dead is the true prophet. Come on down. He was challenging him to a resurrection duel. And when he told us this, we all went, what? We laughed because that was ridiculous. And so I think Vernon blew off George. And that was around Passover time. Well, time is passing, and then I told you about the Lamb, and this is the summertime. Well, summertime of 1987. This is a long year. And he, in the beginning of the summer, I went to visit. My parents had a trip planned to San Diego in California. So one of the things people ask is, were you in touch with your family? Yes, I wrote to my mother. She kept my letters. So this is why I can tell you a lot of what I can tell you now, because I wrote about a lot of this to my parents. So my brother had a judo tournaments planned. So they told me, hey, we'll send you a ticket, come visit us, hang with us. So I joined my parents for a few weeks that summer. I got to see my friend Tammy in San Diego. So I went and had family vacation with them, came back. And then we were progressing through the summer. And then one day I was sitting with Novelette outside her bus and talking with her. And Vernon came down to sit with us, and we were just talking and looking at Isaiah 2, no, I don't believe it's 2, maybe 16, where there's a passage about the daughters of Moab coming at the fords of, not the fords of Arnon, that's Lord of the Rings, at the fords of some river. And he's looking at Vernon's sitting there, and we're reading with him, and we're talking about it. And he's saying, the daughters of Moab, hey, they're not Israelites. And the daughters of Moab bear the vessels of the Lord. And he interpreted that as having babies. So they're also bearing the vessels of the Lord. And he said, they're not Israelites. And I looked at him and I said, so are you saying that it meaning being the bride of Christ, open, or the house of David is open to what we would call women of color? And I didn't say that, to people of other races. And he just looked at us and we looked at him, and the answer was, of course. He didn't say that, but you can say a lot in a look. And I realized Novelette and I looked at each other and went, and I looked at him. I went, and that night I joined the House of David. The Martins were away on their own family vacation, and for some reason he'd been staying in their bus. I'm not sure Sheila Martin knows this, but I lost my virginity in the Martins bus in the woods in Palestine, Texas.
Did you read your Bible at the time?
Did I have my Bible?
What did he give you a Bible study at the time?
No, he gave me a Bible study, all right. No. This was me accepting another invitation. This was a marriage, a real marriage. Obviously consummated, that's the word I'm looking for. We consummated our marriage, our wedding. This was a very spiritual experience for me. I never looked at it as anything other than spiritual. This was God's will. I was being asked, I was not forced. And I woke up the next morning and I felt and some people say, okay, that was your psychological defense mechanism, whatever. But I felt love. I loved him. And it was different from when I went to sleep that night. And I considered that God's gift to me. And yeah. Without going into gory details. I will say the one thing he commented on was the feel of my skin, because he talked about it a lot. He always talked about Oriental skin. There weren't too many Orientals in this group. But one of the things he told me that night, because I asked, I said, so who else is in the House of David? Basically, what's my number? And I was number 6. And he told me who each of them were. And I'm just not going to list it right now because people still are alive.
I understand. So I'll just ask, the women who were in the House of David, did they ever feel competitive with each other, or did they get along with each other?
Yes and no. I was an adult at the time. They were teenagers. And in the early days, we kind of didn't talk too much about it. Robin and I talked, but I didn't talk too much with the others. And for me, it was more of a private thing. My relationship with him was my time, whatever that was. So if he was with me, that's my time. If he was with someone else, that's theirs. And that, I think a lot of us looked at it that way. Was there jealousy? Sure. But for me, but again, I was grown up. I wasn't a teenager anymore. And like I said, it is a spiritual marriage. It was a spiritual experience for me. So I went in knowing I share this man with others because that's what was being asked. I walked in with my eyes open. So for me, it wasn't too bad. And as more and more people came in, that's just part of the deal. I think there were jealousies, certainly when Nicole came in, because with her, he got really giddy, and it was just, literally people were like, oh, really? Just get a room. And they did, but but he wasn't like that necessarily from the entire group. It was, people would be with you and you just see it and you just,